And we also have joined by our distinguished panel of experts. But before we start, I would like to welcome Ms. Ivana Pavkova. She is an analyst at TMP to give an opening remark. Ms. Pavkova, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you again from my side for making the time. And it is very exciting to be here. I would take these next couple of minutes to present TMP. I think that we're all very much familiar with CIPS and with the amazing work that they do. So just to give a little bit of context about what I will be speaking about and why I will be speaking about that, let me introduce myself and TMP. So who's TMP? TMP is a group of dedicated experts who seek to understand kind of complex environmental, social, and security challenges posed by near-term climate change. So we were founded in 2009, and our founder actually comes from a finance background, but he wanted to, do something meaningful and change the world a bit for the better. And so he founded TMP. And one kind of key aspect of TMP from the beginning is that we have always heavily believed and heavily invested in fieldwork, despite being a data-focused organization. And actually, funnily enough, that's what brought me into TMP as well. So my background is in kind of international organizations, but I kind of wanted to, get my hands dirty and see what the research and the analysis and the solutions that we come up with in front of our screen, what do they actually amount to in real life? And so one of these, when we were kind of conducting the field work, one of the complex problems that we identified from very early on was indeed that kind of the reality of climate change that we were seeing on the ground did not match what the projections were saying that it should be. So this is kind of in 2009, 2010, when I think that now we are kind of all aware, right, with the AR6 coming out, that climate change is progressing a lot faster than we had anticipated, but that was not the case back then. Back then, climate change should not have been kind of visible or manifesting at all, according to, models. And yet, kind of wherever we went around the world, whether it was, in Indonesia, whether it was in Cameroon, whether it was in Chile, everywhere we heard people saying that, to put it kind of in simple terms, the weather is just behaving weird, and that it is a problem, particularly for smallholder farmers, particularly for these communities that are dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So what we did is that we heavily then focused over the next several years into understanding the near-term climate change, right? So we said, okay, so if climate change is manifesting already now, then it is kind of logical that it will manifest even more strongly over the next decade, right? So it's the kind of transition to the 1.5 degree world. So we know already that we are going to hit the 1.5 degrees. That is not a question anymore, unfortunately. And it is going to happen sometime between more or less 2029 to 2035, probably sooner rather than later, based on the latest estimations. And so we kind of figured out that you can't be prepared if you don't know what you're preparing for. And therefore, all of our work is kind of focused on analyzing what exactly are going to be these impacts, these climate shifts, in between, well, obviously, I mean, in terms of climate models, it's in between the 1 degree world and 1.5 degree world. In kind of human terms, it's in between now and, you know, about 2032, 2033. And so we kind of apply this knowledge across several different sectors and several different countries. One of those sectors are biodiversity, transition minerals, food security, and several others. But I mentioned these three because these three are all relevant specifically to Indonesia. So the point of the presentation today is to share kind of our view of some of the risks that Indonesia is facing, particularly with regards to food security, and hopefully have a very productive discussion. So that's a bit on our background, and let me just hand it back to the moderator so we can proceed.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Ms. Pavkova. It is truly an honor to have this opportunity to collaborate with TMP and also learn about the wonderful work that you do. And now I am excited to hear, I believe you have a presentation that you'd like to share with us, so I'll give the screen back to you.
Excellent, thank you so much. So let me do the presentation. Excellent. As I just mentioned, the point of the presentation is to kind of share a little bit, because we only have about 10 minutes, so I will try to go quite fast. But to just share a little bit about our vision of what the risks are. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning in the opening remarks, our kind of focus is on systemic risks. So we don't just consider climate risks. It is kind of a bit broader than that. So in that regard, let me just start with a little bit of context here. The key context here and a source of kind of a lot of the issues that we will talk about is that in general, the world is kind of over-dependent on just 4 crops. And I think that everybody who has worked in the food security space for a while will kind of realize that you know, way over 50% of the world's calories come from just these four crops, which is wheat, rice, soy, and maize. And so pretty much what this means is that anytime there is a supply disruption, there is kind of a fierce competition in the market that emerges to secure the supply, which then leads to price hikes and unfavorable outcomes. And these outcomes are particularly severe for middle and lower income countries. And of course, Indonesia is kind of not spared of this trend, even though it's possibly a bit less dependent on some of these crops than some other countries. So about half of the calories consumed in Indonesia come from rice, wheat, and soybeans. And so the interesting trend here is that rice is mostly domestically produced, even though there are rice imports as well, whereas wheat and soybeans are really majority of those come from imports. Now, the second piece of context, which is what I already mentioned a bit in the opening remarks, is that climate change is happening a lot faster and with a lot more intensity than anyone, including the experts, had predicted. And so while we have been kind of ringing the bell for over a decade, we are now where we are with this kind of crucial period of the next 5 to 10 years when we call this period kind of the end of the beginning, because it's the end of the beginning of climate change. Like, it is now that we are really starting to see the kind of more dramatic shifts in the next 5 to 10 years. And so the crucial period is now to kind of heavily invest in adaptation and in increasing resilience. The bad news is that where we stand today, the worst is kind of still to come. The good news is that we now have the information that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago, that kind of allows the key decision makers around the world and in Indonesia to get prepared for these impacts. So sorry, just to kind of narrate a little bit what's happening here in the graphs. So I think it's quite self-explanatory, but basically these are kind of some simple models that we pulled from our data, which show you the increase in drought risk in the next, in a 1.5 degree world. Again, we don't know exactly when the 1.5 will happen. But yeah, some places around the world have a 145% increase in drought risk. This is wet bulb temperature, which I will talk about a bit more later, but it basically tells you wet bulb temperature basically tells you what's kind of the livable temperature for organisms outside, including humans. So there is a specific threshold above which the temperature is no longer livable. And so wet bulb temperature, which includes the measure of temperature and humidity, increases by 375% in the next decade in some places around the world. And as you can see, and again, I will get to that a bit later, but Indonesia in particular is unfortunately very much hit by this increase. So in this presentation, I want to, it's kind of split into two parts, because as we kind of saw initially, there are basically two kind of sources, let's say, of Indonesia's food security. One of them is domestic production, and the second one is imports. So this means that we kind of need to look at the climate risks a bit differently, because obviously those come from different geographical areas. So with these kind of key pieces of context in mind, let's look at what the risks are to Indonesia's imports. And so we analyze the exposure to import risks, where we focus on the nexus between climate shocks and private volatility for key commodities, such as wheat. And so the interesting context here is that, and this is, funnily enough, the same kind of across the world, but a lot of Indonesia's imports come from just one country, which is Australia. And so again, in the theme of kind of over-dependence, or putting all of your eggs or all ones like eggs in one basket, we see this, right, like dependence on one commodity, and then a lot of that commodity is coming from just one country. And so what this means is that if this one country kind of gets, the production in this one country in Australia gets disrupted by climate change, it's not so much an if, it's when. It would cause it would have quite significant consequences for Indonesia, again, through increases in price and decreases in supply. Similarly, soybean and soy meal consumption, which is kind of steadily increasing year on year, is provided largely by imports. And again, those come pretty much from just one country. And it just so happens that kind of, again, this is the key piece of context, and it just so happens that these two places that we had just talked about, so Australia and the US, are also quite exposed to various climate risks. Here, kind of globally, for instance, 81% of soybeans comes from Brazil and the US, and these two score particularly badly in all of our risk assessments, right? So again, going back to the global maps, when we look at drought risk, we see that it's soybean production areas. So I don't know if you can see my mouse as I'm circling, but it's the soybean production areas in the US and in Brazil that are particularly affected by drought risk. It's the wheat production areas in Australia that are particularly affected by drought risk. If we look at kind of consecutive dry days, which is not quite the same as drought, even though it kind of is in the same vein, but basically consecutive dry days is a bit less severe, but it can last over a longer time. And it has also impacts on decreases in production. And again, we see, Australia particularly hard hit, the US, Brazil particularly hard hit. So would this same thing with wildfire risk, or sorry, this is fire weather index. And so again, what happens when there is a disruption to one of these key commodities, and there will be disruptions based on our data, is that the prices skyrocket. We kind of saw this happening with wheat prices after the invasion of Ukraine, even though obviously that's not a climate event, but it's kind of, right, it's a proxy for what's going to happen. And what's kind of interesting here, and I think that this is something that policymakers should really keep in mind, is that when this price increase happened, actually the supply didn't even decrease that year. It was the fear in the markets of a supply decrease that causes the prices to skyrocket and caused a global food security crisis through these price increases. So this is particularly important kind of with the near-term climate change, because yes, there is a huge increase in risk, kind of an unprecedented increase in risk. But on top of that, the risk doesn't even have to manifest through actual events for us to see these price increases that then lead to food insecurity. Now, this all looks really bad, I know, but I, at the same time, don't want kind of the key takeaway to be that reliance on imports is necessarily bad or dangerous. The problem is concentration. If I kind of really oversimplify the issue, and is that, everybody eats too much of the same thing. And those things that we eat only come from a handful of countries. Globally, the exporters of soybeans is like 3 countries. Globally, the exporters of wheat, it's like 8 countries that are responsible for like over 80% of exports. So the issue is this concentration problem, where this is where if then the risk manifests in one of those places, it then leads to all of these market issues that I talked about. But the concentration issue also arises if a country pursues self-sufficiency too aggressively, because what basically ends up then happening is that if those same risks manifest within the country has nothing to fall back on. They don't have established strong trade relationships that they can kind of call on to kind of bring up the supply in the domestic market. So this kind of brings me to the second presentation, where we look at the climate risks to Indonesia and the domestic food production. So in Indonesia, just as much as around the world, agricultural production has been optimized to match certain temperature and precipitation patterns. And again, kind of not to beat a dead horse, but all of these kind of temperature and precipitation patterns are changing. And it is most likely going to have negative consequences for the domestic agricultural production. We have in particular identified 2 kind of, or 3 key risks for Indonesia, which is increases in consecutive wet days, in extremely high precipitation, and in extremely hot temperature. So what we have done is that we've analyzed the key climate risks in Indonesia for the next 5 to 10 years. And I just want to say, keep in mind that this data is already benchmarked to the local averages. So when we say, when you see kind of extremely exposed to consecutive wet days, that's not in comparison to, like the Sahara Desert. It's in comparison to what is average to Indonesia today. So we know that, it's already very wet in Indonesia, but it's going to get a lot wetter. And so if we overlay this with another indicator for extreme heat, we see that, obviously a bit of a different picture, but we see these areas of kind of overlapping risks. And what does that mean for agriculture? Well, the increase in both kind of wetness, humidity, and in extremely high precipitation suggests that, number one, flood risk is going to increase quite dramatically. And at the same time, some provinces, such as East and West Nusa Tenggara, show more risk of drought rather than flood. So we kind of have these extremes that are getting more extreme. The increase in frequency and intensity of extremely hot days, along with the increases in everything humid, so precipitation and wet days, means that the wet bulb temperature that I had talked about at the beginning is going to increase, which means that it's going to be more and more kind of difficult for farmers or any kind of outside laborers to work outside. This in itself kind of can quite significantly decrease agricultural productivity, particularly again for smallholder farmers that do not have access to machinery. And so we know that Indonesia's domestic production will be negatively impacted by climate change. We also know that food-related disturbances carry significant consequences for security and for stability. And so what this means that kind of measures must be taken to ensure stability of food supply and to avoid these disturbances. And I know that there is kind of discussion around or kind of a long-term goal of Indonesia to achieve self-sufficiency. And in our view, it has been achieved, right? I think in 1984, there was a full kind of rice self-sufficiency. And so it is clearly possible to achieve self-sufficiency, but kind of under normal climate. And we are entering a period where the new normal is climate extremes. And so the issue is here is that when the climate risks start to manifest, you don't want to get into a situation where, let's say where Indonesia would be so overly self-sufficient and self-reliant that the disruptions to domestic production would then leave it scrambling to establish emergency trading contracts, likely at premium prices, because that could have kind of worse consequences than a balanced approach, which involves both kind of improving resilience and sustainability of the domestic production, and at the same time also involving trade. Apologies. So our kind of recommendations here, and sorry, I know that I'm running over time, so I'll try to run through it quickly and then we can talk a bit more in the discussion portion. Of course, it is quite important to proactively prepare for these challenges by integrating climate change as a key risk factor in the planning across ministries and industries. Even though climate change is kind of a systemic risk that cannot be necessarily eliminated, it can be mitigated if with the right information and with proactive preparation. Secondly, we strongly advocate for diversification across all levels, both in terms of kind of crops diversification and in terms of having this balanced approach for domestic production and for trading partnerships. And also in terms of and also we advocate for diversification in terms of the trading partnerships themselves, in the sense of not relying overly on one country or one trading partner. I hope that we can explore all of these recommendations a little bit more in the discussion portion. And sorry to have started on such a negative note here, but it is, I think, again, important to have all of the information. And I will hand it off back to Sarah for the discussion.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Ms. Pavkova. Thank you for highlighting such an important message and also the significant impact of climate change on global agricultural production also in Indonesia. And I believe I'm not the only one who already feel the changing nature of our climate now. Maybe we all feel it. And that now is more important than ever for us to prioritize strategies for enhancing climate resilience in agricultural and food sector. One of which is by, as you mentioned before, enhancing climate resilience in, integrating climate change as key risk factors in its planning, diversification, and also having a balanced approach between domestic production and trade. So we hope, I'm ready to dig in more, and we have a wonderful panel of experts here, which I will introduce now. First of all, we have Bapak Gusti Ketut Astawa, the Honorable Deputy for Food Availability and Stabilisation from National Food Agency or Badan Pangan Nasional. Thank you, Pak Ketut, for joining us here today.
Yes, nice to meet you. Nice to meet
Thank
you, Ivana. Oh, am
Nice
I?
to meet
Nice to meet you, Pak Kadir.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Ketut.
Welcome, Pak Ketut. And we also have Ivana Pavkova, who has spoken to us about the really an insight and wake-up call for us all. Emma is an analyst at TMP. She is focused on climate risk. She joined the TMP in 2022 after working on loss and damage mitigation and NDCs at the OECD, UNFCCC, and Cibola partner. And she received her MA in Environmental Policy and BA in Humanities and Social Sciences from Sciences Po, Paris, and she is now based in France, so joining us early. Welcome, Emma. And we also have our own Bapak Kadir Ruslan. He is a board member here at the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. Pak Kadir is a senior statistician and agricultural analyst at Statistik Indonesia. And Pak Kadir has been working at Badan Pusat Statistik since 2010, which he is focusing on agricultural statistics and analysis for agricultural policy making in Indonesia. And his areas of research are agricultural sustainability, gender-based yield differentials, agriculture mechanization, and also small scale for food producers. And now maybe we're gonna start with our discussion and first question of the day. So I would like to ask my first question to Pak Kadir. So Pak Kadir, can you elaborate about what are the specific factors that affect Indonesia's ability to improve its food security and food production?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the question. First of all, I want to thank Emma for a nice and comprehensive presentation. And also, Pak Ketut, good afternoon, Pak. Regarding the question, actually, when we are talking about the factors affect Indonesia's ability to improve its food security and food production, of course, there are many factors, and some of them actually as highlighted by Emma on his presentation. Maybe because of time, I only focus on several of them, and maybe all of us already know. So it is kind of reminder for us actually. The first one I highlight is, of course, related to our discussion today is climate change and environmental issues. So Emma on her presentation already highlighted that Indonesia is vulnerable to extreme weather events like droughts, floods, and other negative impact of the climate change that can damage crops and reduce yields. At BPS, there is a survey called Crop Cutting Survey, and one of the result of the survey show that farmers that experiencing a negative impact of climate change, such as droughts or floods, are more likely to see their yield decrease compared to the previous year. Even the decrease is quite significant, around 9 to 10%. So this is a crucial issue actually for Indonesia. And the survey also pointed out that actually almost 20% of our farmers are experiencing the negative impact of climate change. The event related to the climate change, like droughts, floods, pest intensity attack, and so on. The second factors in my note is land availability and also the land quality. So not only the land availability, but also the land quality. We already know that in the Indonesian context, agricultural land conversion to non-agricultural use is quite massive, and we see that agricultural expansion is limited by competing land uses. So we compete with urbanization, mining, housing, and so on. And at the same time, the quality of arable land is declining due to the overuse and poor farming practices, and etc. So actually at 2021, BPS Statistics Indonesia conducted a kind of survey to measure the sustainability of agricultural land in Indonesia, and they found that, for example, in terms of pesticide use, there are 30% of our agricultural land was considered not sustainable. Maybe because our farmers use too much fertilizer like urea above the recommendation and so on. And also in terms of pesticide, the figure is quite the same. Around 30% of our agricultural land is considered not sustainable. And the next factors will be infrastructure and logistics. So we know that poor infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, make it difficult for farmers to access markets, inputs, and technology. So we need to pay attention to this issue because inefficient logistics increase transportation costs and also can contribute to food losses during distribution. Another factor, also technology and innovation. Actually, CIPS has highlighted this issue in our book titled Modernizing Indonesian Agriculture. So one of the main challenge in Indonesian agriculture is improving our productivity and through the adoption of technology and innovation. And we see that our farmers is struggling with technology adoption and also innovation. For example, if you look at the result of the 2023 agricultural census that already published by BPS Statistics Indonesia, less than 50% of our farmers are adopting modern technology, including digitalization in agricultural practice. So this is also influence our food security and also food production alone. And another factors, of course, government policies. We have Pak Ketut here from government side. Hopefully, Pak Ketut can speak a lot about policy in Indonesia related to food security, particularly in the context of climate change. So in terms of policy, we have to avoid kind of inconsistent agricultural policies, including subsidies, import restriction, and price controls that can distort the market and disincentive productivity improvements. And also, I want to highlight that in the Indonesian context, our food and agricultural policies heavily focused on rice and maybe a little bit neglecting other crops important for nutrition and also food diversity. And also smallholder farming, we know that one of the main characteristic of Indonesian agriculture is, or food production is, the domination of smallholder farmers. Based on BBS data, around, I think, 98% of our farmers actually can be classified as small-scale food producer. So they face challenges in many aspects of cultivation, such as limited access to credit. The result of the 2023 agricultural census pointed out that actually less than 20% of our farmers have access to microcredit, to credit like KUR, for example. And also they are struggling with access to extension services based on the result of the 2023 agricultural census. Less than 10% of our farmers get extension services. And modern farming practice, of course, as I highlighted before. And another factor is population growth and urbanization. We know that our population is continuing to grow with quite high rate. It can be considered quite high. There is additional, I think, 3 to 4 million people every year on average. And also urbanization. So rapid population growth and urbanization increase food demand, putting pressure on domestic food production, of course. And urbanization itself actually reduce the agricultural labor force in rural area. And as mentioned by Emma, international trade and global market volatility, I think, also is a significant factor for our food security and food production. We see that Indonesia depend on food import, for example, like wheat, soybeans, beef, and also rice. So it makes us vulnerable to price volatility and supply disruption in global market. And the last one, I think, supply chain and post-harvest losses. Actually, this one is a big issue. I think in terms of policy perspective, we need more progressive efforts in this area, because it reduces actually the food that available for consumption. So significant post-harvest losses due to poor storage, handling, and transportation reduce the amount of food available for consumption. And so strengthening cold chain infrastructure, for example, or improving processing facilities will be very important for Indonesia. I think that's all some factors that I can highlight. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pak Kadir. So we can see there are a lot of factors that affecting Indonesia's ability to improve our food security as well as the food production. You mentioned climate change and environmental issues such as drought and flood, land availability and land quality, inefficiencies that contributes to food losses, low technology adoption, and also there is a financing factors to our smallholder farmers and population growth and urbanization. Also, you mentioned international trade and global volatility, supply chain, and also policy, which provide us with a segue to our next question, which is for
Actually,
Pak Ketut.
I missed one point. I want to add one point. I think it is very important. I want to arise that to address all this challenge, we need kind of cross-cutting approach,
Yeah.
So it requires coordinated efforts across multiple sectors.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up a very good point, Pak Kadir. We'll move to Pak Ketut next. Pak Ketut, so what is, in your perspective as someone who is working at the National Food Agency, what is the current situation of our food security in Indonesia, and now that we are in the facing the effect of climate change? You're still on mute, Pak.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Your question about what is the current situation of food security in Indonesia during climate change. I think we know when we talk about food security, so we talk about 4 factors minimum. The first is availability, the second is affordability, the third is accessibility, and the last is food safe and sustainability. So the first we discuss is about more than food availability, about the production. So I want to explain you about the overall food security condition in relative good. This can be seen from 4 conditions. The first is we can take from a global food security index score. You know, Indonesia Global Food Security Index score in 2022 is 60.2. Indonesia is ranked 63 out of 113 countries. The Global Food Security Index score consists what I said before, 4 aspects, namely availability, affordability, food quality and safety, and sustainability. Based on data from 2018 and 2022, the sustainability aspect has increased significantly, you know. Then, which means that government can carry out continuous food provision for the community. On the other hand, there is a decrease in the availability aspect. That means climate change is very impact for the availability of food in Indonesia. The second we can know about the food security is according to the Food Insecurity Experience Scale. Indonesia is a moderate vulnerability zone, namely in 2023 with a score of 4.50. Looking at the development of the last 5 years from 2019 to 2023, household or individual food security has increased. The third we can know about the security, food security in Indonesia is the prevalence of undernourishment, namely the percentage of the population that consume less energy to live healthily and remain active according to minimum standard. Indonesia's POU value is in 2023 of 8.53% is still below the government target of 5.2%. This condition need to be concerned for government to focus on program to reduce the POU value. This is very important what the government need to do to reduce the POU to get near the target of government. The fourth is Indonesia Disability Pattern Score in 2023 is 94.1, an increase from the previous year of 92.3. This score is in line with the target set for 2023 of 94.0. This means that the Indonesian population is consuming the food, good food and diversification food. This is the real condition of Indonesia's food security. So we need now, don't worry, but this is the alert about the climate change. We need to, the solution is how to improve the production, local production, Indonesian production. That's a need to improve about the local production so that some program of the government already taken, because I want to be separate from Ministry of Agriculture and National Food Agency. It's different tasks. So the Ministry of Agriculture strengthening the upstream side or production side, while the National Food Agency is responsible for the post-harvest side to the downstream of consumer level. I think it's enough. Over. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Ketut. Thank you for mentioning the 4 pillars of food security, which is affordability, availability, accessibility, and also the access. I also have dropped the link to the JFSI that Pak Ketut mentioned if you want to take a look at the report. And I will now move on to Ms. Pavkova. Emma, how does climate change impact the domestic agricultural production? If you want to elaborate more, even more than your presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I think that in the interest of time, I'll keep it quite brief, also because I know I ran over with my presentation. So just really briefly, obviously the impacts of climate change on productivity are mostly negative, or on production. At least in Indonesia, it is not the same for all countries there, but in Indonesia, the kind of expected impacts are mostly negative. And as I said, the climate change impacts that is already happening, and it is kind of expected to be these extremes that farmers are already facing are expected to become more frequent and more intense. Depending on where you look in Indonesia, these could be either decreases or increases in precipitation, leading to either droughts or floods. One thing that I didn't mention, but that we are also seeing, is what we call kind of changes in seasonality. So what this means is that rain patterns are becoming less predictable, which is particularly worrisome for when kind of these rain patterns change around the planting season, because there it can have really significant impacts. And I don't have the number right now in my head, but there was a really significant decrease in yields if there was either too much rain or not enough rain around the planting. Kind of one thing that I want to add, and it kind of touches also on a question that was put in the chat, is that another kind of dynamic is that the unfavorable climate conditions increased costs for farming, because farmers, for instance, have a tendency to again, hotter weather can lead to more pests, or farmers can have a tendency to need either additional water or additional fertilizer. There is kind of quite a significant increase in the cost of farming in the domestic production, where the incomes have not then necessarily kept up with that. So that's kind of another impact. In the more long term, what we can expect, but again, like our focus is on the near term, but what we can expect kind of in the more long term is risks to coastal farming from seawater rise and saltwater intrusion, which also harms the rice paddies quite significantly. So I would probably for now stop there, and I just want to say that I think that both of my co-panelists have made some excellent points, and I really look forward to the discussion. But I will keep my other remarks for the discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Emma. And The next question is for Pak Ketut. So you mentioned previously that NFA or Bapanas is focusing more on the post-harvest and the upstream of the upstream, right? So what actions has Bapanas taken to address the food crisis due to climate change, Pak?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. There are many various programs. The National Food Agency has issued to strengthen food security. The first is food supply and price stabilization policy. This is a very important policies because this policy includes a reference price policy for both the selling price at the producer level and the selling price at the consumer level. We need the price is very support for the farmers. That's the very important. The purpose of the reference price is to provide guidelines for government when there is a price disparity at the producer and the consumer level with the price reference to stabilize price. The second is government food purchase price. This price is a benchmark for bullock to absorb a farmer's rice yield. This is the second important thing. This is a price can be the lowest reference price at the farmer level. This is a very important to be implemented by bullock so that the price of rice at the farmer level is not too cheap. If you want to resilient, so the farmers must get a good price for the yields. A reasonable price will make a farmer comfortable farming with the aim of achieving food self-sufficiency. The third is creating national food balancing projection data. This data is to find out how much food consumption, then domestic food production, and then how many potential food import needs. With this data, it is easier for the government to make decisions regarding the focus of food production and food imports. The fourth is policy to strengthening government food reserve. Government food reserve based on the food law must be owned by the government, provincial government, and regency city. This food reserve can be used, among others, to stabilize food supply and price in the community, food aid, disaster relief, and international aid. This is the function of food reserve. The fifth is ensuring food safety. The implementation of routine food safety supervision is carried out by the National Food Agency along with the provincial and district or city food services. The aim of to ensure that food consumed by the community is safe and suitable. And the last is encouraging food diversification and consumption. Food diversification and consumption as carried out massively to the community. The National Food Agency introducing the slogan "Healthy Eating," eating a variety of foods, balanced nutrition and safe. In line with this, it also introduced the public to various sources of carbohydrates other than rice, such as sodium, cassava, sweet potatoes, and taro, and so on. Not only rice, if you want to get a carbohydrate. The seventh is Stop Food Waste Program. This is important because whatever you mass production, if you still more waste food, it's very difficult to make a secure food security. So the National Food Agency collaborate with non-governmental organizations engaged in the utilization of food waste, such as Food Bank of Indonesia, Food Cycle of Indonesia, and the Association of Modern Retail, and so on. That is the strategy of some program that implemented by a National Food Agency for get the food security in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Ketut, for introducing us to, I believe it was 8 programs that the NFA has now. My next question is for all of the panelists, but I'll start with Pak Kadir. So, Pak Kadir, you mentioned about all of the factors that contributes to our food security and as well as food production. Do you think what are the strategies and approaches that we should take to ensure the future of Indonesia's agriculture and also food security while facing the effect of climate change? You're still on mute, Kak.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry for that. Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Sarah. Actually, we can combine many strategy and approaches, and some of them actually are already on place, already ongoing. What we need is just to escalate, actually, to improve the scale of the approach or strategies. Let me highlight some strategy or approach that can be undertaken. I think we already know about this. The first one, we have to promote climate resilient agriculture, of course. So we can promote what so-called climate smart agriculture techniques, such as crop diversification, agroforestry, and integrated pest management, for example, and also develop drought and flood resistant crop varieties. It is very important. So I think Indonesian government need to invest in research and development to create crops that can tolerate extreme weather condition. And I do believe that actually our researcher in the Ministry of Agriculture has done a lot in this area. Actually, there are many varieties has been developed. The issue is actually with the implementation, with the adoption of with all the varieties. And also water management system, very important. We have to enhance our irrigation efficiency. We also need to improve our drainage system to reduce water waste and improve resilience to both floods and droughts. Also, we can pursue what's so-called agroecology and sustainable land use. So there is a terminology, I think, perhutanan sosial. It is relevant with the terminology of agroforestry, in which we encourage a system that integrate trees into agricultural landscape. So it can help stabilize soils, improve water retention, and also, of course, provide additional income streams for farmers, not only from timber, but also non-timber forest products. Yeah, we also must promote sustainable land use planning and also soil health improvement. And technology and innovation, I want to highlight also technology and innovation. I think it is also very important. We can escalate, we can improve the implementation of what's so-called pertanian presisi or precision agriculture through the utilization of technologies like remote sensing, drones, and soil sensors, for example, to optimize the resources use and monitoring the crops. Actually, this pertanian presisi is already undergoing by the Ministry of Agriculture. What we need, once again, the escalation. And also digital farming platforms, it is very important. So Petani Millennial program actually is very good to expand access to digital platforms that provide farmers with weather forecast, for example, market information, and also best practice to adapt climate variability. Research and innovation, of course. Actually, Indonesia already has a strong research institution under the Ministry of Agriculture. So once again, what we need is the escalation, focus on developing new crop varieties, pest resistant strains, and so on. And of course, strengthening infrastructure and logistic is very important, particularly in rural area. Building food supply chains also very important. And I also want to highlight the importance of diversification of our crops and our farmers' livelihood. So we need to promote crop diversification, not only food diversification, but also crop diversification. So we need to encourage our farmers to diversify beyond staple crops, particularly rice. So we need to introduce more climate resilient crops and higher value crops like fruits, vegetables to enhance our food security and our farmer income. We also need to support alternative livelihoods for our farmers by providing training and support them to diversify their income source, not only from agriculture. And of course, policy and institutional support is very crucial. So we need to strengthen agricultural policy, develop long-term agricultural policy that promote resilience to climate change, such as, I think this one is not in place, yeah. Subsidy for climate resilient technologies. And also we have to increase our crop insurance schemes because based on the result of the 2023 agricultural census, only 0.45% of our farmers actually under crop insurance. Yeah. And also policy on climate risk insurance also matters, and also land tenure security. And yeah, Emma said that climate extreme is a new normal. So our farmers have to adapt to this, and what they need actually is kind of a capacity building and education. That's why in answering the first question, I highlighted the crucial role of the extension service, yeah, because it is very crucial for capacity building and education for the farmers. So our farmers need training programs related to how to mitigate the impact of climate change, for example, how to implement climate smart agriculture and so on. And also, as highlighted by Pak Reiner in our book, Modernizing Indonesian Agriculture, government and also our farmers actually should have a kind of partnership with private sector. So public-private partnership is very important in this case. So we have to collaborate with the private sector because implementing agricultural practice that can strike the balance between food security and climate change to some extent is quite costly, you know. That's why we need the presence of private sectors here to do investment in agri-finance to promote good agricultural practice that not only can ensure our food security, but also can deal with the issue of climate change. And the last one, actually, there are many points, but the last one from me is food waste reduction. This is a big issue, actually. That's why in the presentation, Bappanas always remind us about this, including Pak Ketut. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Kadir. You highlighted about how we need to accelerate some strategies that are already in place, and you also mentioned some of additional strategies that maybe we can all keep in mind. And I will ask the same question to Emma, even though I know that you have mentioned your recommendation on how we can improve our resiliencies in terms of food security in addressing climate change. But if you have any other points that you would like to reiterate, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I think that a lot of my points were already either made through during the presentation or just now by my co-panelists. Really, I agree with everything that especially you, Kadir, were saying, but also with the Baban's recommendations. I would say that, I want to highlight, again, from our side, the need for developing kind of climate resilient crops. So whether that is specific cultivars of rice, or as we talked about and we all highlighted, kind of the need for like a variety of sources of carbohydrates. I think that I'm not going to repeat everything that was just said. I would just add kind of one thing from our perspective, TMP's perspective, is that when it comes to implementing all of these solutions, right? What you mentioned, Kadir, such as these new varieties, or implementing technology and innovation, and helping farmers to join kind of digital farming platforms and do more smart agriculture, etc., or even just adopting different varieties. From our experience in the field, all of these solutions, or it's important that all of these solutions are kind of implemented using bottom-up approaches, because if it comes solely as like a top-down regulation, it just doesn't lead to the outcomes that you would want to see. This has been our experience. So that's something, again, all of the kind of solutions that have been mentioned, I fully agree with them. And this is just something that I wanted to add on top of that. One more thing that I wanted to add, which is not kind of a little bit linked to the solution and a little bit linked still to the climate impacts, is that we have talked a lot about food waste, in particular when it comes to kind of processing or kind of failures in processing, storage, and transportation. I think that this is another area where we really need to focus on how that's going to be impacted by climate change, because again, for instance, more humidity and more heat can negatively impact food storage. It leads to faster spoilage, or floods can damage roads or transportation systems. So the kind of considering the climate impacts a bit more holistically, and not just the impacts on production itself, but also on how it impacts the like storage and processing and transportation of food, which kind of leads to the four-pronged definition that you were giving of food security. This is also quite important. So I don't want to take any more time, because I fully agree with everything that was said. So these are just a couple of kind of additional things that I wanted to say.
Thank you, Emma. Pak Ketut, do you have any like quick additional point for the strategies that we should take to ensure Indonesia's shift to food security? You're still on mute, Pak.
Thank you, Emma. I believe that how to make atau to get food security is how to implemented the first is encouraging and strengthening to implementing of stopping food waste. That is very important. Only one. And the second is how to make production or efficiency production. The second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak. So food waste and increasing productivity. And last question before we go to the Q&A. So this is for Ms. Pavkova and Pak Kadir. What relationship or approaches can Indonesia and the international organization in this respect is, like such as FAO, pursue to improve food security during climate change? If you have one or two sentences for that. I'll start with Pak Kadir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Actually, this is a quite difficult question for me because I don't have experience in this area. But based on our discussion, I think Indonesia and international organization can pursue several collaborative relationship and approaches to achieve mutual benefits in improving our food security amidst climate change. For example, one area that can be a good collaboration is, of course, technical assistance and capacity building. That's why we need PMT, we need EMA to assist us in technical assistance and capacity building related to the climate change. We can collaborate for knowledge sharing and research collaboration, I think, with international organizations like AVO, World Food Program, and also maybe the International Fund for Agriculture and Development. And another area, I think this one is very important, climate finance and investment partnership. You know, we need access to climate adaptation funds, and Indonesia can tap into international climate finance mechanism like the Green Climate Fund, for example, and Global Environment Facility. And also, as I mentioned before, maybe because we need public-private partnership, I think the presence of international institutions like the World Bank and also Asian Development Bank is very important in this regard. And there are many more, I think, area. For example, the last one for me is food security and nutrition programs. There are many areas of collaboration that can be pursued. For example, Indonesia can engage in international food security programs like the Global Agriculture and Food Security Programs. I think Pak Ketut already involved in this area. And I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Maybe
Pak
Emma
Kadir.
can add some more. Thank you.
I think that you made some really excellent points. I also agree that kind of capacity building in itself is very important, but of course you can't build capacity without supporting it with finance. So for sure, those are kind of the key areas where something can be improved. I would, on top of that, highlight also the kind of cooperation, like regional cooperation. For instance, between like Southeast Asian countries, there can be technology sharing or kind of like regional capacity sharing. There is also already the +3 emergency rice reserve initiative. So that's where you kind of have a mutual support between ASEAN members to pool and share rice stocks. So these kind of initiatives can be really helpful when it comes to securing food supply in case of shortages caused by climate change. The last thing that I would add is that when I talked about kind of the stability of food imports and the need to diversify the import partners, I would say that kind of a good rule of thumb, and now of course this is not a prescriptive recommendation, but I think that a good rule of thumb would be to go from like having one country responsible for like 50 to 80% of the imports to having at least like 5 partners kind of more evenly split, because we have seen evidence in the past that disruptions to 20% of imports can already have like quite significant consequences domestically. So having kind of a more even split between 5 or more import partners, even though it increases a bit the a bit kind of the burden on negotiating those contracts, etc. It in the long term kind of provides a bit more food security. So that would be kind of my two quick add-ons. And I will stop there just so we can have time for further discussion.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Yeah, so now we're gonna start the Q&A session. I see the chat box is already filled with questions, so I'm sorry that we might not be able to answer all of them, but our panelists here, you are welcome to address the question via chat if you will. But I will bring to the screen a question from Nurfianto from Malang. This is a question for Emma. So the first question is, how about analysis of disruption to supply cost price hikes for phosphorus and potassium fertilizer and its effects on food price hikes? And the second one is there any tools that can convert the damage of climate change impacts such as drought, flood, seawater increase, etc., to economy loss in agricultural production and supply chain? Thank you. So Emma, you're welcome to answer the question.
Thank you so much for the question. I was actually just typing the answer in the chat, but I'm happy to answer. In the plenary. So yes, indeed, we have analyzed the kind of causal effect that disruptions to supply of fertilizer, or indeed increases in price of fertilizer, have on food prices. Now, long story short, there is a causal effect. So yes, indeed, when there is a disruption to fertilizer supply or increase in fertilizer supply, it has an kind of negative effect on food prices. I don't have I don't remember right now what kind of the conversion rate there would be, but yeah, the effect is absolutely there, and thank you for pointing it out, and it needs to be taken into account when analyzing food prices. As for the second question, so there are studies that did this analysis kind of regionally or on a country level, and for specific crops. I'm not aware of any tool, and I might be wrong, but I'm not aware of any tool that can kind of across the board convert any sort of climate impacts or all climate impacts on all crops globally into economic losses. So I think that it was the studies that I have seen were either like quite concrete or did kind of a global look. But yeah, something that would be something where you could kind of go, like a tool where you could like go and click on a country and see exactly what the losses in agricultural production are going to be. I'm not aware of, and I might be wrong. If anybody knows of anything, please put it in the chat. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that. Okay, we got a lot of questions, but I'll pick this one. So this can goes to any of the panelists. So is there any best practices for other countries with similar characteristics with Indonesia that we can learn from in preventing or reducing the negative impacts of climate changes on agriculture? If not, maybe that's a question for us all to ponder, agricultural best practices. But there is also a question that just came from Julia Suryakusuma. Maybe I'll ask this to Pak Kadir. Will food estate guarantee food security for Indonesia?
Yeah, this is a tough question for me. Yeah, my answer is very simple. Let's see. It's actually, this one is a good effort. basically this one is kind of extensification to improve our food production, but yeah, let's see what will happen in the next 10 years maybe. Yeah, maybe Pak Ketut, I think from government side can elaborate more about this.
Would you like to elaborate about it?
For the question,
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was meant to unmute you and then.
what the question?
Will food estate guarantee food security for Indonesia?
From who?
From the chat box from Julia Suryakusuma.
Julia Surya Kusuma. Sorry. Will there be a recording available on YouTube? No. Where is the question?
It's the last question, Pak, about food estate.
Sorry, I can answer this question because the food estate is arranged by Ministry of Agriculture. So this is a Ministry of Agriculture side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak. Okay, maybe we can go to a question from Alejandro. This is to Emma or Pak Kadir. So, does crop diversification lead to reduced production of staples, considering the importance of staples in people's diets? Can crop diversification be a bad thing, or is it more of a good thing due to nutrition, climate resilience, etc.? Thank you. Emma, would you like to take this question?
Sure. So I think that's a really interesting question to ponder. Of course, when agricultural land is limited, I think that there are just so many variables that it's all spinning in my head. But of course, when agricultural land is limited, and if the kind of diversification that you're pursuing does not, or the staples that you have does not allow for intercropping or multiple crops within the same year, then yes, it can lead to reduced production of the staples. Now, the second thing, aside from nutrition, which yes, of course, we're not, rice is not the most nutritious carbohydrate source, nor is, for instance, wheat. So aside from kind of the nutrition angle, where indeed the diversification can improve those outcomes, I think that one more thing to consider is, or two more things to consider. One of them is whether these crops that you're diversifying for have other benefits, such as, more drought resistance, or maybe they are more calorie dense, or indeed maybe they have they are more nutritious. So those are kind of the benefits that you can consider. The kind of negative impact that you can consider is actually people's happiness and people's perception, because these staples are cultural foods, right? I don't know, I don't speak Indonesian, but I know that in Japanese, the word for meal and the word for rice, I believe I'm not wrong. I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe that the word for meal and the word for rice is the same. And so when you have so kind of the negative impact or the negative effect to consider is, are people actually going to accept those crops? Are they going to want to grow them? Are they going to want to eat them? Are they going to want to buy them? And the thing is that if these and what's kind of going to be the outcome on the social on the kind of social perception of the living standard, right? So is this kind of gets into something that I didn't talk about a lot during my presentation, but that is kind of also our focus, which is how kind of climate change interacts with social stability. And this is one thing that we have seen in this is kind of a trend that we have seen in some countries, that when people can't access foods that they are kind of traditionally used to eating, even if kind of objectively on paper their condition is improving, they feel that their condition is getting worse because they cannot access those traditional foods in the amounts or as easily as they could have, right, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Sorry, this is kind of a off the fly response, so I'm not sure that it was very coherent, but I just wanted to share our vision of the cultural foods and staples.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a really important point as well, which we also need to consider the participation, I would say, for from the community itself. But I do you have something to add to this question?
Yeah, basically, I do agree with Emma's point. As I mentioned, crop diversification is a positive thing. Even we need this one actually. And to make it work, of course, we need a comprehensive approach, not only from one side, for example, from consumer sides or producer only. We need a comprehensive approach, I think, covering both of them. Because from producer side, we are talking about people livelihood, yeah. So our farmers make decision based on their needs, what kind of crops that they want to cultivate, for example. Of course, they're considering about their livelihood. And also from consumer side, they are talking about their food preference, their food culture, as Emma said. So a comprehensive approach needs to make crop diversification works and has a maximum significant impact to improve our food security. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Kadir. I know that we have 2 minutes left on the clock, so I'll give a short conclusion before we end this webinar. But it was a really wonderful discussion, and thank you so much to our experts, Ketut, Ivana, Emma Pavkova, Analyst from TMP, and also Pak Kadir Ruslan. So maybe I would like to reiterate our discussion today. There are a lot of things or strategies that we need to do to enhance the food security towards the more climate resilience way in our agricultural sector, which is by integrating the climate change as key risk factors in its planning. Also, we mentioned a lot about diversification, not only the food, but also the crops. And also having a balanced approach between domestic production and trade is also one of the important things that we need to consider. And another important aspect that has been brought up in this discussion is about financing and technological adoption in agriculture, so we can have a good agricultural practice that is more resilient to climate change. So finally, we've reached the end of the event. This is a wonderful collaboration between CIPS and the TMP and Badan Pangan Nasional. And thank you again to all of our experts here. It is a really fruitful discussion, and and also we would like to thank our participants who are actively participating by asking a lot of questions. And I hope to see you all in our next webinar. So yeah. Also, please help us to improve the next event by filling out the survey that someone dropped on the chat box. Okay, see you in another CIPS event.
Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Terima kasih Pak Ketut.
Thank you, Pak.